The pre-dawn light barely touched the horizon, painting the sky in muted hues of gray and faint rose. Inside the old farmhouse, the scent of damp earth and hay clung to the air, a familiar comfort. Ethan Carter, a teenager with the lean build of someone accustomed to physical labor, moved through the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of long practice. He was 16, but the calluses on his hands told a story of years spent helping on the family farm. His worn-out jeans, patched in several places, and a faded flannel shirt were his usual attire, practical and unpretentious. He ate a meager breakfast of oatmeal, the only sound the distant, contented lowing of a cow from the barn and the soft creak of the old wooden floorboards beneath his feet. His parents were still asleep, their rest hard-won after long days tending to the land that had sustained their family for generations. Ethan's gaze, usually thoughtful and distant, lingered on a faded, sepia-toned photograph tucked into the frame of the cracked kitchen mirror. It was a picture of his grandmother, her eyes sparkling with an inner strength that always reminded him of the resilient spirit of the land itself. She had taught him to observe, to listen, to understand the subtle whispers of the earth and the mechanics that made it yield. Her wisdom, passed down in quiet moments, felt more valuable than any textbook lesson. As the sun began to peek over the distant hills, casting long shadows across the fields, Ethan finished his breakfast. He rinsed his bowl and left it to dry, a small gesture of help before heading out. The farm was their life, their legacy, but also their struggle. The land was good, but the economy was not, and each year brought new challenges that tested their resolve. Ethan knew that his future, and perhaps the future of the farm, depended on something more than just tilling the soil. With a sigh, he grabbed his worn backpack and headed out. His rusty pickup truck, a relic that had seen better days, sputtered to life with a cough and a rumble. As he drove down the narrow, muddy track that led from their farm to the main road, he noticed a familiar sight ahead. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly neighbor with a kind, wrinkled face, was struggling. She was pushing her husband, Mr. Henderson, whose frail body was slumped in a broken-down wheelchair, up a steep, muddy incline. The wheelchair's wheels were stuck, churning in the thick mud, and Mrs. Henderson's face was etched with exhaustion and worry. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled his truck over, the old engine sighing to a halt. Jumping out, he hurried to their side. "Mrs. Henderson, are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. "Let me help you." "Oh, Ethan, dear," she gasped, her voice strained. "We're almost there, but the mud, and Mr. Henderson is not feeling well." "Don't you worry," Ethan said, already assessing the situation. "We'll get him there." Without a second thought for the mud that would ruin his shoes or the time he was losing for school, Ethan carefully helped lift Mr. Henderson from the broken wheelchair into the bed of his pickup truck, cushioning him with an old blanket he kept there. He then carefully pushed the stubborn wheelchair up the rest of the steep, muddy road, its wheels finally gaining traction on firmer ground. It was a small act, a brief detour from his usual route, but the grateful tears in Mrs. Henderson's eyes and Mr. Henderson's weak but sincere "Thank you, son," were all the reward Ethan needed. He wasn't one for grand gestures, but he believed in doing what was right, quietly and without fanfare. He dropped the Hendersons off at the small clinic in town, making sure they were safely inside before getting back into his truck. He was now definitely late for school, but a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling that outweighed any potential reprimand. When Ethan finally pulled into the school parking lot, the bell had already rung. He quickly jogged through the nearly empty hallways, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and headed straight for the science lab. It was his sanctuary, a place where the logic of circuits and the elegance of engineering replaced the unpredictable realities of farm life. Inside the lab, the air hummed with the faint scent of ozone and something metallic. Ethan made his way to his workbench, a cluttered space filled with wires, salvaged circuit boards, and the skeletal frame of what would one day be his greatest achievement, an eco-friendly irrigation system. This wasn't just a school project. It was his family's hope, his ticket to a future beyond the farm's struggles. The system, still in its early stages, was designed to extract water from seemingly dry wells using a revolutionary kinetic energy conversion method, all powered by repurposed farm equipment and old, discarded electronics he'd meticulously repaired. He'd spent countless hours in the barn, tinkering, experimenting, drawing inspiration from his late grandfather's old blueprints, filled with cryptic notes and sketches. His grandfather, a brilliant but reclusive inventor, had a knack for seeing potential in the discarded and forgotten, and Ethan had inherited that same intuitive understanding of complex machinery and systems. He was often underestimated by his teachers and peers, who saw only the quiet farmer's son in worn clothes, not the budding genius. As he carefully reconnected a set of wires, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting a message from his parents, but the sender was an unknown number. The message read, "The system is rigged. Be careful, especially when you least expect it." Ethan frowned. "Spam," he muttered, dismissing it with a flick of his thumb. He usually ignored such messages, but something about this one lingered, a faint echo of unease. He thought about the old, cryptic message in his grandfather's blueprints, a series of symbols that seemed to hint at hidden mechanisms or warnings, a small detail that had always piqued his curiosity, but he had never fully deciphered. He dismissed it again, focusing on the intricate circuit board in front of him. He had too much work to do, too much writing on this project, to be distracted by anonymous warnings. He had a natural ability to sense when something was off, a slight tremor in the force, but he often ignored it, attributing it to stress. This time, he should have listened. Unbeknownst to Ethan, the anonymous message wasn't spam. It was a warning from a concerned, anonymous contact within the school administration who had noticed unusual activity surrounding the upcoming Innovators Showcase. This contact, sensing an impending injustice, had sent out a generalized warning, hoping it would reach the right person. Ethan, however, remained oblivious to the subtle undercurrents of sabotage that were already beginning to churn beneath the surface of his seemingly normal school day. The quiet before the storm was about to break. The hum of the science lab was usually a soothing balm to Ethan, but today, an underlying current of anxiety rippled through the air. The Regional Innovators Showcase was just a few days away, and it was his family's lifeline. The grand prize, a full scholarship to a prestigious engineering university, a dream that felt almost within reach. His eco-friendly irrigation system, a testament to his grandfather's genius and his own tireless work, was nearly complete. He could almost taste the future it promised, not just for him, but for his parents and their struggling farm. However, the path to that future was paved with obstacles, most notably Principal Thompson. Thompson was a man built of polished shoes and thinly veiled contempt for anything that didn't fit his narrow worldview of success. He saw Ethan's worn jeans and calloused hands not as signs of honest labor, but as symbols of rural backwardness. To Thompson, the scholarship was already earmarked for Brandon Thorne, the principal's golden boy. Brandon's father, a powerful real estate developer, was a major school donor, and Thompson was always eager to appease him. Brandon himself was an arrogant, intellectually mediocre student whose innovative ideas often consisted of plagiarized concepts or expensive, commercially available products. Ethan felt the familiar prickle of hope, quickly followed by the familiar sting of fear. He knew he was underestimated, even ridiculed, by Thompson and Brandon. He'd overheard their dismissive comments in the hallways, their laughter echoing through the empty classrooms. But this wasn't just about winning. This was about proving his worth, not to them, but to himself, to his family, and to the legacy of his grandfather. This wasn't just a scholarship. It was a desperate claw at survival, a chance to pull his family out of the suffocating grip of mounting debts and dwindling profits. He wrestled with the fear of failure, the agonizing thought of returning to his parents with news of defeat. He saw the tired lines around his father's eyes, the quiet sacrifices his mother made daily. He knew the burden of their hopes rested squarely on his shoulders. But beneath the fear, a steel resolve hardened in his gut. He wouldn't just build an irrigation system. He would build a future. He wouldn't just win a scholarship. He would vindicate every calloused hand, every early morning, every whispered doubt. The phone call from the principal's office came on a Tuesday, 2 days before the showcase. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew this feeling, the one that tightened his chest just before bad news. He walked through the buzzing hallways, acutely aware of every curious glance, every hushed whisper. Principal Thompson sat behind his large, gleaming desk, an imposing figure of authority. Brandon Thorne was there too, lounging in a visitor's chair, a smirk playing on his lips. Ethan's gut twisted. He knew then that this wasn't going to be a simple reprimand. "Ethan," Thompson began, his voice devoid of warmth, "we have some serious allegations against you." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printouts of what appeared to be answers to a recent advanced physics exam, with Ethan's name scrawled at the top. "We have reason to believe you cheated on your last physics exam. The similarities between your answers and the answer key are uncanny, and we have a witness." Ethan stared at the papers, his mind reeling. "Cheating? That's impossible. I didn't cheat. I studied for that exam." Thompson raised a manicured hand. "Don't bother denying it. Brandon here witnessed you accessing a restricted file on the school server, right before the exam." Brandon, finally speaking, leaned forward with mock sympathy. "Yeah, Ethan, I saw you. Thought you were being sneaky. But I've got eyes everywhere." His smirk widened, and Ethan's fists clenched. He knew Brandon was lying. He hadn't cheated. He'd been in the library that day, meticulously researching a component for his irrigation system, nowhere near the restricted files. He had a photographic memory when it came to technical details, which often made his test answers appear almost identical to the correct ones. It was a talent, not a crime. "This is a setup," Ethan protested, his voice rising. "Brandon's lying. He wants me out of the competition." Thompson sighed, a theatrical display of disappointment. "Ethan, your emotional outburst only solidifies our concerns. Given the overwhelming evidence and your lack of remorse, I've made a decision, effective immediately. You are expelled from Northwood High School." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Expelled. It echoed in Ethan's mind, a death knell to his dreams. Disqualified from the competition. No scholarship, no engineering university. The farm, the burden, his carefully constructed future, shattered in an instant. The injustice burned within him, a hot, bitter ember. He felt a desperate urge to fight, to rage against the blatant unfairness. But what could he say? What could he do against the word of the principal and the son of a powerful donor? Thompson stood, indicating the conversation was over. "Your parents will be contacted. You may gather your belongings from your locker and leave the premises. Immediately." As Ethan walked out of the principal's office, his head held high despite the crushing weight in his chest, he heard Thompson's voice, loud and clear for anyone in the hallway to hear. "This is a serious matter. We cannot tolerate academic dishonesty at Northwood. Ethan Carter's actions have consequences, and we must uphold the integrity of our institution." The public pronouncement was designed to humiliate him, to brand him a cheater in front of his peers. As he collected his few belongings from his locker, he saw Brandon Thorne watching him from down the hallway. A triumphant, sneering grin plastered across his face. It was a cruel, petty victory, but a victory nonetheless. Ethan's vision blurred with unshed tears. He wanted to lash out, to expose the truth, but the words stuck in his throat. He was just a farmer's son, up against the powerful, walking out of the school building. The weight of the world pressed down on him. The cheerful chatter of students, the distant shouts from the sports field, all seemed to mock his despair. His expulsion wasn't just a punishment. It was a permanent scar, a brand that would follow him. His ordinary life, the quiet routine of farm work and school, was irrevocably shattered. There was no going back. His only path now was forward, into the unknown, to fight for his future in a way he never could have imagined. The drive home was a blur of unshed tears and burning humiliation for Ethan. The rusty pickup, usually a symbol of freedom and resilience, felt like a cage. The familiar landscape of rolling fields and distant barns, once a source of comfort, now seemed to mock his shattered dreams. He pulled into the dusty driveway of the farm, the engine sputtering to a halt, mirroring the turmoil in his gut. His father, Mr. Carter, a man whose face was a roadmap of sun-baked wrinkles and quiet strength, met him at the barn door. He was a stoic man, not given to grand displays of emotion, but Ethan saw the subtle slump of his shoulders, the deep disappointment etched in his eyes. He didn't need words. His father's silent understanding was more crushing than any reprimand. Ethan recounted Principal Thompson's accusations, the fabricated evidence, Brandon Thorne's smug lies. His father listened, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, a silent tempest brewing within him. "I didn't cheat, Dad," Ethan murmured, the words catching in his throat. Mr. Carter finally turned, his eyes holding a rare flicker of raw pain. "I know, son. I know you didn't. But what do we do now? That scholarship. It was everything." The weight of their precarious financial situation, the unspoken burden of the farm's future, settled heavily between them. Meanwhile, at Northwood High, Principal Thompson was basking in the glow of his supposed victory. He had arranged a press conference, conveniently framing Ethan's expulsion as a decisive act to uphold academic integrity. "We must send a clear message," he declared, his voice booming with false righteousness. "That dishonesty will not be tolerated. Our institution stands for excellence and ethical conduct." Brandon Thorne, standing beside him, preened for the cameras, playing the role of the diligent student who had bravely reported the wrongdoing. He reveled in the public humiliation of the dirty farmer boy. "Ethan Carter is a sad example." Brandon sneered to a local reporter, a glint of malice in his eyes. "Some people just don't belong in a serious academic environment. His kind should stick to what they know." Their words, dripping with condescension, painted Ethan as a cheat and a rustic simpleton, further cementing his discredited image in the community. They believed they had effectively and permanently crushed his spirit and his future. However, not everyone at Northwood High bought into Thompson's narrative. Sarah Chen, the school's quiet but fiercely observant science teacher, felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She had taught Ethan for years, had seen his innate brilliance, his diligent work ethic, and his unyielding integrity. She also knew Brandon Thorne's manipulative nature and Thompson's blatant favoritism. Sarah had been discreetly observing Brandon's suspicious behavior, his unexplained access to the principal's office, his whispered conversations with Thompson, his uncanny knowledge of test details before exams. She had even tried to voice her concerns to Thompson about Brandon's suspicious, innovative project and the principal's biased judging criteria, only to be met with a thinly veiled threat of disciplinary action for insubordination. Thompson had subtly reminded her of her probationary status, almost expelling her for daring to question his authority. She was now under a cloud of suspicion herself. That evening, a harsh, unexpected drought began to settle over the region. The normally vibrant green fields began to wither, and the soil cracked under the relentless sun. The Carter farm, already teetering on the brink, felt the immediate impact. The well, usually reliable, dwindled to a mere trickle. This was more than a setback. It was an existential threat, driven by a desperate need to help his family and prove his worth. Not to Thompson or Brandon, but to himself. Ethan retreated to the old, dimly lit barn. He pulled out his half-finished irrigation system, its intricate components gleaming under the single bare bulb. He worked tirelessly, fueled by a potent mix of grief and defiance. He knew he had to make it work, not just for the competition he was now excluded from, but for their very survival. He He pored over his grandfather's old blueprints. The cryptic symbols he had dismissed as irrelevant now seemed to whisper clues. He focused on a particularly complex section of the blueprint, a part of the system that dealt with kinetic energy conversion. It was something his grandfather had only hinted at, a theoretical breakthrough that seemed impossible to achieve. As Ethan manipulated the wires and circuit boards, his calloused fingers moved with an almost surgical precision, his mind a whirlwind of equations and intuitive leaps. He remembered his grandfather's quirky habit of hiding key technical details within seemingly random sketches of old farm tools. He saw a faint, almost invisible etching on one of the discarded components. He was using a tiny, stylized symbol of a gear, nestled within a rose. It mirrored one of the cryptic symbols in the blueprint, the one he couldn't decipher. It was a secret, a key to a deeper layer of his grandfather's genius. Suddenly, a connection clicked. He recognized a subtle energy signature, an almost imperceptible resonance that indicated a hidden pathway for water. He made a crucial, intuitive breakthrough, modifying a complex valve mechanism and rerouting a series of internal pumps. With a soft hum, the system, though unfinished, whirred to life. A small, consistent stream of water began to flow from the previously dry well, gushing into a trough he had set up. It was a mere trickle compared to what was needed, but it was water. It was proof. It was his grandfather's legacy, brought to life by his own hands. Unbeknownst to Ethan, Sarah Chen had been watching, driven by a deep sense of unease and her quiet belief in Ethan's innocence. She had driven her modest sedan, parking it discreetly down the road from the Carter farm. From the shadows of a nearby tree line, she witnessed Ethan's ingenious act. She saw the flash of the tiny gear and rose symbol on the component, recognizing it from one of the cryptic sketches in Ethan's project proposal, a detail she had previously dismissed as a minor aesthetic choice. Her eyes widened, amazed by his raw genius and the truly advanced nature of his design. This was not the work of a cheater. This was the work of a visionary. A cold dread settled in her stomach as she realized the true depth of Thompson and Brandon's deception. The next morning, Principal Thompson, utterly oblivious to Ethan's groundbreaking breakthrough, held another press conference. He announced a new school initiative, a community water relief program to combat the escalating drought. Under the brilliant leadership of our star student, Brandon Thorne, Thompson beamed, a sickly sweet smile plastered on his face. Northwood High is proud to launch a program that will provide much-needed water to our local farmers. He showcased a basic, commercially available pump system that Brandon had supposedly designed. It was a cynical PR stunt, designed to cement Brandon's image as a philanthropic hero and Thompson's as a benevolent leader, further marginalizing and humiliating Ethan. Brandon, arrogant and brimming with false confidence, stepped forward. While some prefer primitive, outdated methods, he declared, glancing pointedly in the general direction of Ethan's farm, Northwood believes in modern scientific solutions. My project will bring true relief, unlike on how others. He snickered, clearly enjoying the public denigration of Ethan's rustic approach, believing his expulsion had sealed his fate and erased any memory of his own intellectual inferiority. The public, easily swayed by the flashy presentation, nodded in agreement. Thompson and Brandon believed they had won. They had crushed Ethan, eliminated the competition, and established their narrative. They did not know the truth that Sarah Chen now carried, nor the silent, powerful engine of innovation turning in Ethan's old barn. They were basking in a false calm, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break, a storm of truth and vindication that would shake the very foundations of their carefully constructed lies. The air in the Northwood High Auditorium crackled with anticipation, a stark contrast to the oppressive quiet of Ethan's barn. Today was the day of the Regional Innovators Showcase, a stage where Ethan had once dreamed of showcasing his genius. Now, it was a symbolic arena, a place where he was meant to be publicly absent, a testament to his alleged disgrace. The Grand Hall, usually filled with the echoes of student performances, now hummed with the sophisticated murmurs of university representatives, local media, and a throng of parents eager to witness the next generation of brilliance. Principal Thompson, impeccably dressed and radiating an air of self-satisfaction, strode across the stage. Beside him, Brandon Thorne, a picture of false confidence in a tailored suit, preened for the cameras. Thompson's voice boomed through the loudspeakers, welcoming everyone and praising the spirit of innovation at Northwood High. He then launched into a glowing introduction of Brandon, highlighting his groundbreaking community water relief program, carefully omitting any mention of the commercially available pump system at its core. Ethan, despite his expulsion, was there. He had arrived at the school well before dawn, a silent, almost invisible figure in the shadows. Sarah Chen, driven by a fierce belief in his innocence and an even fiercer disdain for Thompson's corruption, had helped him bypass the school's increasingly stringent security measures. She believed he was the only one who could truly expose Thompson and Brandon. He stood near the back of the auditorium, a quiet observer, his heart a raw knot of nerves and determination. He carried the weight of his family's hopes, the memory of his father's weary eyes, and the lingering scent of their parched fields. This was it. His last chance. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, sat in the audience, their faces a mixture of anxiety and quiet, desperate hope. They had defied Thompson's implicit threats and their own ingrained shyness to be there, a silent testament to their unwavering faith in their son. They caught Ethan's eye from across the room, and he offered them a small, reassuring nod. "And now," Thompson announced, gesturing grandly towards Brandon, "our esteemed student, Brandon Thorne, will present his truly revolutionary project." Brandon stepped forward, a smug grin plastered on his face. He launched into a well-rehearsed speech, full of buzzwords and empty rhetoric, about his innovative water system. A large screen behind him displayed sleek graphics and polished videos of his basic pump, attempting to pass it off as something groundbreaking. The judges, a panel of academics and industry professionals, listened politely, some nodding, others simply bored. As Brandon neared the end of his presentation, he cued a demonstration. A large, clear tank filled with water stood center stage, hooked up to a complex array of pipes and meters. He aimed to show how his system could efficiently filter and pump water. With a flourish, he pressed a button. The pump whirred to life, initially pushing water through the pipes as expected. Brandon smirked, glancing at Ethan's parents, a subtle, cruel gesture of triumph. Then, without warning, the hum turned into a grinding screech. A terrible smell of burning plastic filled the air. The water flow sputtered, then stopped. A panel on the pump sparked, and a wisp of smoke curled upwards. Panic flickered across Brandon's face. He began to stammer, trying to explain away the malfunction. Principal Thompson rushed to the stage, his composure crumbling. He tried to troubleshoot the system, poking at wires and pressing buttons, but his frantic attempts only made the situation worse. The smoke thickened, and a high-pitched whine began to emanate from the pump, a sound that quickly escalated into a dangerous rhythmic throb. The large screen behind them, connected to the school's power grid, began to flicker erratically. "What's happening?" someone in the audience shouted, as the lights in the auditorium dimmed. "It's overloading the grid," another voice cried out, a technician from the back of the room, his face pale with alarm. "If it short-circuits, it could take out the entire school's power, maybe even the neighborhood's." Chaos erupted. People started to murmur, then to shout. Principal Thompson, now sweating profusely, tried to regain control. "Stay calm, everyone. It's just a minor glitch." But his voice lacked conviction. He knew the gravity of the situation. A major power outage, potentially caused by a student project, would be a catastrophic PR disaster. One of the judges, a stern-faced engineer, stood up. "Principal Thompson, this is unacceptable. If this system causes a power surge, the school will be blacklisted from all future competitions, And legally, the repercussions could be severe. You have 15 minutes to fix this, or we will be forced to shut down the event and report this incident immediately. The ultimatum hung in the air, a sword of Damocles. Principal Thompson's face turned a sickly shade of green. He looked at Brandon, who was now frozen with fear, utterly useless. The arrogance had drained from him, leaving only a shell of panic. "Does anyone know how to handle this?" Thompson stammered, looking desperately at the judges, then at the other students, none of whom had a clue how to fix the complex power issue. The clock on the large screen, which had been counting down the time for Brandon's presentation, now ominously displayed 15:00. The seconds began to tick away, each one amplifying the rising tension. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt electronics and the collective fear of the audience. Everyone looked for a solution, but no one seemed to know what to do. Ethan, standing alone in the back, felt the eyes of his parents on him, a silent plea for salvation. This wasn't just about a scholarship anymore. It was about protecting the entire community, about proving his worth when everyone else had failed. The stage, once a symbol of his humiliation, had become the ultimate test, a gauntlet he had no choice but to run. The acrid smell of burning plastic thickened, choking the air in the Northwood High auditorium. The high-pitched whine from Brandon's malfunctioning pump pierced the growing panic, and the giant screen behind the stage flickered erratically, casting an ominous, pulsing glow over the horrified faces of the audience. Principal Thompson, his once impeccable suit now disheveled and sweat-stained, wrung his hands, utterly helpless. Brandon Thorne, reduced to a trembling shell, stared blankly at the smoking machinery, his arrogant smirk long gone. The clock on the screen mercilessly ticked down 008, 007. "This is a disaster," a university representative shouted, rising from his seat. "The power grid is about to fail. Someone has to do something." At that critical moment, a calm, clear voice cut through the chaos. It was Sarah Chen. She stepped forward from the shadows of the stage wing, her eyes fixed on Ethan. "There is someone," she announced, her voice resonating with quiet authority. All eyes turned to her, then to where she gestured towards the back of the auditorium, where Ethan stood. The murmur of the crowd swelled. "Ethan Carter," someone whispered, confusion turning to disbelief. But he was expelled. Principal Thompson, regaining a fraction of his bluster, pointed a trembling finger at Ethan. "He's expelled. He can't. He won't. He is the only one who can fix this," Sarah declared, her gaze unwavering as she met Thompson's horrified eyes. "Ethan's project, his real project, is a true innovation. He understood the nuances of kinetic energy conversion and power stabilization in a way no one else here does. He built his system to prevent these kinds of overloads. He can save us." With only minutes left on the clock, a palpable tension gripped the room. The judges, desperate and out of options, looked at each other, then at Sarah, a flicker of hope in their eyes. They knew Sarah Chen was a respected, albeit unconventional, science teacher. Her conviction was undeniable. "Let him try," one of the judges finally called out. "But," Thompson sputtered, still clinging to his crumbling authority. "Principal," another judge cut him off sharply. "At this point, we have nothing to lose. His expulsion can be addressed later. The safety of everyone here is paramount." Reluctantly, Thompson nodded, his face a mask of defeat. "Fine, but if he fails, the consequences will be severe." Ethan didn't wait for a formal invitation. He moved with practiced speed, his farmer's hands, so often underestimated, now a blur of purposeful motion. He bounded onto the stage, ignoring Thompson and Brandon, his focus entirely on the smoking pump. He didn't waste a second, his eyes quickly scanning the complex array of wires and circuits that Brandon had mishandled. His mind raced, calculating, assessing the damage, and devising a solution. He knew Brandon's design was a poorly executed, stolen concept. The flaw wasn't just in the component, but in the fundamental understanding of power distribution. He could see the subtle error that only someone with his intuitive grasp of systems could spot: a miscalibrated current regulator, a hidden flaw in the stolen blueprints Brandon had tried to pass off as his own. His fingers flew, unplugging dangerously overloaded circuits, rerouting power lines, and swiftly replacing a burnt-out resistor with one he salvaged from a small repair kit he always carried in his backpack. The intense concentration etched on his face was absolute, his breath coming in short. Sharp gasps as he worked against the ticking clock. 0003, 0002. A final decisive click of a rewired component. 101. Then, silence. The rhythmic throb of the pump died. The acrid smoke began to dissipate. For a terrifying second, the lights in the auditorium went completely dark. Thompson's lips curled into a smug, knowing smirk, convinced of Ethan's catastrophic failure. Brandon let out a small, relieved sigh, a silent cheer for his rival's downfall. But then, with a soft, confident hum, the lights flickered back on, brighter than before. The giant screen, which had gone black, now displayed a steady, green waveform, indicating perfectly stable power. The dangerous whine from the pump was replaced by a smooth, gentle purr. The threat was averted. The school's power grid and the surrounding communities was safe. A collective gasp swept through the audience. It was followed by a stunned silence, then a ripple of whispers. Their faces, previously etched with fear and doubt, slowly transformed. Gasps of astonishment turned into murmurs of awe, then into a thunderous applause that shook the very foundations of the auditorium. People rose to their feet, cheering, whistling, their faces beaming with wonder and profound admiration. They had witnessed not just a technical rescue, but a true act of heroism. Principal Thompson's face, which had been pale with fear, now turned an ashen white. His smug grin was replaced by a look of utter disbelief, then humiliation that burned through his skin. He stared at Ethan, his eyes wide, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Brandon Thorne stood frozen, his arrogance shattered, his jaw slack in stunned silence. The humiliation of being exposed as incompetent, of having his rival save the day, was a bitter pill to swallow. The judges, who had dismissed Ethan out of hand, now looked at him with newfound respect, their initial skepticism replaced by an overwhelming sense of vindication for Ethan. One of them, the stern-faced engineer, slowly rose and began to applaud, a wide smile spreading across his face. Ethan's triumph was not just a personal victory, not just a technical fix. It was a public recognition of his true worth, his quiet integrity, and the sheer undeniable brilliance that Principal Thompson had tried so desperately to suppress. The stage, once a symbol of his public shaming, had become the arena of his undeniable triumph. The thunderous applause for Ethan resonated through the auditorium, a symphony of vindication that shattered Principal Thompson's carefully constructed world. His face, still ashen, was a roadmap of utter defeat. The smug grin that Brandon Thorne had worn for so long vanished, replaced by a mask of stunned humiliation. The ensuing chaos of cameras flashing and reporters clamoring for interviews bypassed them completely, focusing solely on Ethan and Sarah Chen. Within minutes of Ethan's triumphant intervention, the consequences for Thompson and Brandon began to unfold. The stern-faced engineer, one of the showcase judges who was also a board member of the university, wasted no time. He approached Principal Thompson, his voice low but cutting. "Principal Thompson," he began, "your conduct and the blatant academic fraud we've witnessed today are an utter disgrace to this institution. You are hereby placed on immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation into your practices and the fraudulent claims made by Mr. Thorne." Thompson tried to protest, stammering about his years of service, but the engineer cut him off. We've received anonymous tips regarding your questionable financial dealings with the Thorne family, specifically concerning school funds and preferential treatment. Ms. Chen has also provided valuable insights into your biased actions. Your reputation, principle, is now irrevocably ruined. Thompson, pale and defeated, was escorted from the stage, his authority crumbling before everyone's eyes. The whispers of his corruption would soon become public allegations, leading to his inevitable dismissal and severe legal repercussions. Brandon Thorne, exposed as a plagiarist and a liar, was immediately disqualified from the competition. The full extent of his academic fraud, including stolen project concepts from former students, was swiftly revealed. He was publicly stripped of his accolades and subsequently expelled from Northwood High. His father, the wealthy real estate developer, watched in horror from the audience as his son's carefully cultivated image, and by extension his own business dealings, crumbled. The Thorne family's reputation and financial standing would suffer significantly in the wake of this public scandal. For Ethan, the transformation was dizzying. The scholarship, once a distant dream, was now a certainty. The prestigious engineering university's representative approached him personally, bypassing all competition protocols. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice filled with admiration, "your ingenuity and quick thinking today were extraordinary. We are honored to offer you a full scholarship to our engineering program, regardless of the showcase results. Furthermore, your eco-friendly irrigation system is revolutionary. We want to support its development. We're prepared to offer you a substantial research grant to continue your work." This wasn't just about money or academic prestige. It was about purpose. It was about the opportunity to truly pursue his passion, to build on his grandfather's legacy, and to make a tangible difference in the world. He could now finally provide for his parents, secure their farm's future, and use his unique talents for a greater good. The burden that had weighed him down for so long began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of relief and excitement. Weeks later, the chaotic media storm had settled into a quiet hum of national recognition. Ethan and Sarah Chen sat in the hushed, familiar comfort of the school library. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Sarah, now a celebrated figure for her integrity and courage in speaking out against Thompson, exuded a quiet triumph. She had been instrumental in exposing the corruption and was now heralded as a champion for ethical education. "It still feels a bit surreal," Ethan admitted, tracing the rim of his coffee mug. "One day I was a cheat, expelled. The next, I'm going to university and getting a research grant." Sarah smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "You earned it, Ethan. Every bit of it. You always had the talent, the integrity. You just needed a stage where your true brilliance could shine, and someone to believe in you when no one else would." Ethan met her gaze, his heart swelling with gratitude. "And that someone was you. Ms. Chen, you risked your career, your reputation, everything, for me. You were my helper, my advocate when I had no voice." Sarah shrugged modestly. "I simply did what was right. But watching you, Ethan, seeing your quiet determination and your unwavering commitment to your project, it taught me something too. Humility and genuine talent will always overcome arrogance and deceit. You proved that today." "What about you, Ms. Chen?" Ethan asked. "What's next for you?" Sarah's eyes sparkled with renewed purpose. "I've been approached by the school board. They want me to lead a new initiative, focused on fostering ethical education and promoting integrity across the district. I'm going to help build a system where talent is nurtured, not suppressed, and where character is valued above all else." Ethan nodded, a sense of deep respect settling over him. Their paths had crossed in the most unexpected and difficult circumstances. But from the ashes of injustice, a profound connection had formed. They were two quiet individuals who, through their unwavering commitment to what was right, had brought down a corrupt system and forged a new path for themselves and for others. The quiet, peaceful hum of the library seemed to echo the new calm in their lives, a resolution that was not an end, but a meaningful new beginning. 5 years later, the scent of damp earth and blooming wildflowers filled the air, a familiar comfort that grounded Ethan in his new reality. He stood on the porch of the now thriving Carter family farm, a landscape transformed. His eco-friendly irrigation system, once a desperate school project, was now a patented, globally recognized innovation. It was revolutionizing farming practices, bringing life to arid lands, and providing sustainable solutions to communities struggling with drought across continents. The farm itself was a model of sustainable agriculture, a testament to his vision and his family's enduring spirit. Ethan, no longer the quiet farmer's son just hoping for a scholarship, was now a renowned agricultural engineer and a philanthropic force. His success hadn't just brought financial stability, it had given him a platform to give back. He established the Root and Bloom Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing scholarships and mentorships to talented, underprivileged students from rural areas. He wanted to ensure that no other aspiring innovator, no matter their background, would face the same obstacles he once did. His personal life, too, had blossomed. He and Sarah Chen were more than just professional allies. Their bond had deepened into a profound and unwavering partnership. Sarah, now a respected director of ethical practices for the regional school board, was instrumental in implementing integrity-focused educational programs across the district. She often joked that she spent her days weeding out figurative thorns from the educational system, a clear reference to her former principal. Their shared commitment to justice and their quiet strength had forged an unbreakable connection, a love built on mutual respect and shared purpose. That bright spring morning, Ethan stood on the stage of the Northwood High School auditorium, a place that once represented his deepest humiliation. The school had been renamed the Carter Chen Academy of Innovation, a tribute to his grandfather's visionary spirit and Sarah's unwavering integrity. He was the keynote speaker at the annual Innovators Showcase, a vibrant event filled with enthusiastic young minds presenting their projects. "When I stood in this very auditorium years ago," Ethan began, his voice calm and resonant, "I was a scared kid, a farmer's son, facing what felt like the end of my dreams. But I learned that day, sometimes, the greatest challenges lead to the most profound breakthroughs. It taught me the power of perseverance, the importance of integrity, and the incredible impact one person or one simple idea can have when given a chance." He then announced a groundbreaking partnership between his company and the newly renamed academy, offering internships, research grants, and mentorships to aspiring young inventors. He made it clear that the program would specifically seek out students who showed raw talent and humble dedication, often those overlooked by traditional systems. He spoke of his own experiences, sharing how a deep understanding of the land, a talent inherited from his grandfather, had given him the unique perspective needed to solve complex problems. From the audience, Sarah Chen watched him, her eyes beaming with pride. She remembered the shy, underestimated teenager and saw the confident, compassionate leader he had become. Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey and the new, hopeful reality they had built together. As Ethan finished his speech, a distant whirring sound began to grow louder. The audience murmured, glancing towards the large windows at the back of the auditorium. The sound intensified, and then a sleek, modern helicopter descended slowly from the sky, landing gently on the newly constructed helipad behind the school, kicking up a gentle breeze. It was no longer a symbol of arbitrary judgment or the arrival of powerful, corrupt figures. Instead, it bore the insignia of a major international agricultural development firm, potential investors and partners for Ethan's global foundation. Ethan walked to the edge of the stage, his gaze sweeping across the excited faces of the students, then towards the newly dedicated plaque on the wall commemorating his grandfather's legacy. It was etched with an image of a gear nestled within a rose, the same cryptic symbol from his grandfather's blueprints. Now fully deciphered and understood, as a testament to his ingenuity and the resilience of nature. He thought of the worn-out jeans, the calloused hands, the meager breakfasts, and the silent strength of his parents. He thought of Principal Thompson, a fading memory of prejudice and deceit, and Brandon Thorne, whose fleeting triumph had dissolved into obscurity. And then he thought of Sarah, his guiding light, his partner in all things. The auditorium, once a place of public humiliation, was now bathed in the warm, golden light of the setting sun, a beacon of innovation and opportunity. It radiated hope for a new generation, a future where talent was recognized, integrity was celebrated, and a farmer's son could rise to change the world, one sustainable solution at a time. The helicopter landing was no longer a moment of dread, but a symbol of expansive possibilities, the far-reaching impact of a life well lived and dreams realized. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.